Hey everybody, this is Pastor Shaun Blakeney, and welcome to the Pastor's Playbook. This is your go-to resource for leading with faith and focus. Each week we're going to uncover practical strategies, biblical insights, and inspiring stories to help pastors and ministry leaders stay on course, build stronger teams, and make a lasting impact for the kingdom of God. Whether you're in the huddle or on the front lines, this is your playbook for effective, faith-filled leadership. Now let's jump in and open up today's playbook. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Pastor's Playbook. We're so glad you're joining us today. Hopefully you're loving the podcast. I'm loving sharing some insights to leadership wisdom over the last 30 plus years of ministry. I feel like I don't know everything, but experience has given me a whole lot of insight into some things to do and things not to do. And I want to be able to create this podcast to be able to kind of give you a playbook, if you will, in ministry, in leadership, in life, of how to navigate through some difficult leadership scenarios. And this is episode 3. And I want you to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know how you're loving the podcast. I'm loving developing out the curriculum and the lessons each week for you. So hopefully your leadership, no matter what capacity of leadership you're in, you're benefiting from these podcasts. And today I want to talk about the game plan in regards to the culture by design. Culture by design, building what you want before it builds itself. I think culture is one of those things, doesn't matter who you are or where you are on your spiritual journey of life. You have to realize that culture does not create itself. We have to be intentional about creating the culture of the environment that we want. And I think that this is one of the biggest lessons for us as leaders, is to figure out how to generate, how to build intentionally the right culture, right? Every organization has a culture. Every church has a culture. Every staff has a culture. Every ministry team has a culture. The question is not whether you have a culture. The question is, are you building it intentionally, or is it happening accidentally? See, if you don't build the culture will build you. This is one of those comments that I make, I feel like pretty regularly from the platform on a Sunday when I preach. I let people know that hopefully you're coming to Anchor Church to be changed by Anchor Church. Don't come to Anchor Church to try to change Anchor Church. When God shoulder tapped me to start this church, there was a significant DNA or a culture, if you will, that God had impressed upon my heart to have for our church, and that was a family. We don't want a big church. We want a big family. And that comes with a lot of good, bad, and ugly, right? Family sometimes fights with family. Family argues with family, but family loves family. And if you come to Anchor Church, you're going to get loved on. You're going to get hugged. You're going to get talked to, right? That is the culture we are creating. And sometimes people come in and they don't like, we don't have this, don't have this, don't have that. Well, there's lots of churches that have those things, but that's not what we have, right? We've created a culture here, or a DNA in the life of Anchor Church that we're trying to intentionally continue to build. And here's what I've learned. You can have a great vision, you can have great people, you can have a great strategy, but if your culture is unhealthy, eventually your unhealthy culture wins. And I feel like so many organizations, so many churches, so many opportunities we have had out there to build a great culture, and we miss the opportunity. And we wonder what happened. Well, it was that the culture accidentally formed because you and I didn't intentionally form it, right? Culture is what happens when nobody's looking. It's the behaviors people reward. It's the conversations people have. It's what gets celebrated. It's what gets tolerated. It's the atmosphere people feel when they walk into a room. That is the culture. Peter Drucker famously said this: culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Why? Because strategy tells people what to do. Culture determines whether they're actually going to do it. See, culture is your organization's operating system. And most leaders spend enormous time creating plans, but few spend enough time creating culture. I think a lot of times we focus on building a plan, building a purpose, building a vision, but we never create the right culture to develop out the systems we have in place. And you have great systems, but don't have a great culture, because culture is already being created every single day, whether you want it to be or not. You got to have the right culture. The question is, are you shaping it or is it shaping you? Just a couple things in regards to the culture we've tried to create here at Anchor Church. When we first started our church, we were a church of, 20 people meeting in a little community room. And I knew the culture that I wanted to create was an all-inclusive culture. Didn't matter what you look like, didn't matter what you wore to church, you were going to be accepted. We weren't focused on religiosity, we were focused on relationship. We had a young girl that started to come to the church, and she was covered in tattoos. Neck tattoo, sleeves. She had tattoos everywhere. She had a couple piercings in her face, and she goes, I want to serve at Anchor Church. What area can I serve in? I'm like, you are going to be a greeter at the front door. Why is that? Because I want every single person that comes in here to know that these are the kind of people we accept. A lot of churches, you have tattoos. Oh my goodness. I want people to know that this church accepts you exactly how you are. One of the cultures that I've tried to create here at Anchor Church is when I'm preaching, I want our church to speak back to me during the sermon for a couple reasons. Number one, I want to know you're engaged. But number two, you retain more information mentally if you're engaging verbally. That's scientifically proven. And so I will, before every sermon, most of the time, remind our church, especially when we were first starting our church, that we are a church that verbally responds to the message. Preaching is not a spectator sport. It's for you and I to participate in. Why would I do that every week? Because I'm creating a culture of response. I'm creating a culture of talkback. See, if I get up to preach every Sunday and there was no response, I could not get frustrated with our church because they were never taught what that culture looked like. One of the cultures I've tried to create here at Anchor Church is that it doesn't matter who you are, where you are on the leadership structure of our team, you're going to be a servant. There have been many a times on a Sunday I have unclogged a toilet. I've taken out garbage. I don't mind to do that. And people are like, oh, Pastor, we got it. But I am trying to create a culture that everyone serves. See, if you're too big to serve, then you're too small to lead. And at Anchor Church, we are a church of servants. It's what Jesus did. He got down and washed the feet of his disciples. Why? Because no one did it and because he was trying to prove a point. It's all about servanthood, right? So today I want to give you 5 leadership principles for creating a culture that is intentionally developed, not accidentally inherited. And I really believe if you can engage today and take some great notes, take some copious notes today, because I think you and I are missing out on really creating that culture that people desire and that you want, right? Here's point number 1. How do we build that culture? Number 1, remember that what you tolerate will become your culture. What you tolerate will become your culture. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6, it says, a little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. You could allow or tolerate certain things on your staff, in your home, in your business, in your organization. And those little things turn into big things. And if you begin to allow things to happen or tolerate a wrong culture will get into all of the dough of your organization, of your leadership, of your church, of your business. And you got to make sure you don't tolerate the wrong things because they will eventually take over. See, culture is not built by what you preach. Culture is built by what you permit. And I look at that in our culture today, like where we are as a country. We have tolerated things for so long. We've gone downhill as spiritually as a country. Why has that happened? Well, because we tolerated things. Same things happens in your business, in your organization. The things that you tolerate will begin to take over your organization. It begins to develop out the culture. Most leaders think culture is created through mission statements, but culture is actually created through standards. Whatever consistently goes unaddressed eventually becomes accepted. I remember when my kids, when Austin and Alyssa were small, I had to nip in the bud right away. You don't talk back to your mom. You don't talk back to your dad. And if I hear you disrespecting your mom, there will be consequences for disrespecting your mom. And if I heard it, I would immediately address it. I wasn't going to tolerate it. Why? Because what I'm allowing to happen eventually becomes a pattern in their life. And what you overlook and you allow will eventually take over. And I had to communicate, we're not going to do that. And I set a precedent. Same thing happens in your business, in your organization, in your church, in your life, in your family. What you tolerate will begin to take over the organization or the culture, if you will. So your culture isn't defined by your values on paper. It's defined by the behaviors you allow repeatedly. Let me say it like this. What you tolerate today will become your culture tomorrow. And what I realized early on as we started Anchor Church is there were certain things that we wanted and certain things that we didn't want. I can remember one weekend where I was preaching and I think I had used a secular song in my message for something, and somebody got really, really irritated that I used a secular song. And I just knew after that conversation, Anchor Church was probably not going to be the church for them, because I was probably maybe going to use another illustration or a scenario that didn't fit their vibe. And I wasn't willing to change my style to fit their comfortability. And I think that sometimes for us, we allow things to happen. And because you allow it to happen because we want the approval of people, it takes on a certain dynamic in your business organizational culture that you wish you didn't have, but it's because you tolerated the wrong things and now you're living in the wrong things, right? Standards create culture more than slogans. You can come up with a cute slogan about how culture is important, but the question is not, do you have a cute slogan? Do you have a consistency to build intentionally the right culture, right? Imagine if I, as a homeowner, I had termites. And I saw that I had termites, but I didn't do anything with the termites because I'm like, well, it's not that big of a deal right now. So I ignore the problem. You know why? Because the damage seems small. And months later, what I realized is the whole structure of the house has been compromised. Why? Because I didn't deal with the termites as soon as I saw the first sign of destruction. I just let it go. And that's happening to a lot of us in our businesses, organizations, family life, churches, is we see effects of wrong things happening, but because we don't address it, the wrong things take over and they begin to take precedent in the culture of your church or your business or your organization. See, culture works the same way. One unchecked attitude, one toxic team member, one repeated behavior, right? Over time, it just becomes normal. And everyone feels like that kind of behavior is tolerated. And it's not tolerated, right? Why? You're creating the culture. You got to ask yourself, what behavior frustrates me the most? And now ask yourself, have I addressed that with the team? Have I addressed that with the staff? Have I addressed that with the family? If you've got things that you see, that you spot, that irritate you, but you're not addressing the irritation, it's going to continue to fester in your culture and drive you crazy, right? So the first thing, what you tolerate will become culture. Point number 2, culture is caught more than taught. I really truly believe that culture is caught more than taught. 1 Timothy 4:12, we find out we're supposed to set an example. It doesn't say speak an example. It says be an example. Set the example, set the tone, set the strategy, set the pace. Let people know this is what we expect. See, people learn culture less from manuals and more from models. I could hand our staff a manual of how they're supposed to act, or I could actually illustrate for them and show them how they're supposed to act. I did a staff meeting a couple months ago, and what I realized going into that staff meeting was I had expectations for our team, but they were expectations I never communicated to our team. And so I was getting frustrated at some team members because I had expectations that they weren't meeting, but in their defense, I'd never communicated or modeled for them or told them, culturally speaking, what I expected and the expectations of how they should work. And once I shared through that staff meeting the expectations I had for a team, I think I had like 10 of them. These are expectations I have if you're on staff at Anchor Church. Then I was able to address those. But I can't address those if I first don't communicate those. And we as leaders just can't communicate expectations of what we expect from staff or from leaders if we ourselves aren't willing to live those out. A leader is always teaching. Even when the leader is not speaking, the leader is teaching. People may forget your policies, but I promise you they won't forget your example. They may forget your policies, but they won't forget your example. Culture is leadership behavior repeated by everyone else. It's what it is. The team eventually becomes who the leader consistently is. Why do we have such a loving church? Well, because I believe I'm a loving guy. I want to hug people. I want to love on people. I'm not going to hide in the green room after services. I'm going to exhaust myself and love on people. Why? Because that's what I want to do. I want to love people to the point of exhaustion. That's what Jesus did. Yeah, I get time alone. I get time to myself, but I want to hear. I'm loving on people, right? A parent can teach honesty all day long, but if a child sees dishonesty, the lesson changes. I realized when my kids got older and I was driving, and I was an impatient driver. I'm not now, but I'm a very impatient driver to this day. But I realized as my kids got older, they would see me respond in certain ways, knowing that I was a pastor and a follower of Jesus. And they were like, "Hey, Dad, why'd you say that?" "Oh, okay, kids." And I had to learn. They're watching everything. Can I tell you something? Your family's watching you. Your staff's watching you. Your team is watching you. So are you communicating effectively the culture that you want, and are you living out the culture that you want? See, the same is true in your leadership. People do not simply listen to leaders, they study leaders. And you may not think that people are watching you, but I promise you, they're watching you. Just like my kids in the backseat watching me as I drive. Your team, your staff, your family, they're watching how you live. They're watching how you work. They're watching how you lead. So, practical application. If everyone on your team acted exactly like you, would you be proud of the culture you created? And if you can't answer that question honestly, maybe you got to reevaluate the culture that you're creating or the example that you're living out for the culture that you want, not the culture that actually happens. Here's point number 3. How do we build this culture? You got to realize, point number 3, that celebration creates repetition. Celebration creates repetition. I put this point in here because I realize celebration creates a joyful culture. And I put this in here because I got to work on this. And the reason why I have to work on this is because I am always, my personality, I'm a very driven, disciplined, committed personality. I have a hard time celebrating, right? Because we do something big as a church, we have a massive win, I'm on to the next win. And what I've realized is I've got to take some time to celebrate with the team. Because if I don't celebrate the team with their wins with our team, and I just keep moving on, then the team doesn't get to celebrate what we did. And I want a culture of celebration. I just don't want a culture built of hard work. I want a culture built that we celebrate when the hard work is done, what comes to fruition out of the hard work. And I'm really challenging myself in this one, that celebration creates repetition. I want to be more of a celebratory leader. I want to celebrate with our team the big wins. See, Paul says, Romans 12:10, honor one another above yourself. Celebrate people, celebrate wins, celebrate things that you see out of the life of people. When they do a great job, talk about it, celebrate it. It shows them that you see what they're doing and you value who they are, right? Here's the leadership insight. Whatever gets celebrated gets repeated. So people pay attention to what leadership applauds, and every celebration is a cultural vote. This is one of the things we have to work on. Your applause is training your organization. So if culturally speaking, you're never encouraging your staff, encouraging your team, encouraging your kids, all you're doing is pointing out what they do that's not right, what they do that's wrong, then they're going to have a culture that is a culture of fear, a culture of disdain, a culture of frustration, because all they're just doing is on the hamster wheel of life, making the work happen. But celebrate when the work is done well, right? Culture grows where celebration flows. What leaders celebrate, teams duplicate. Imagine 2 churches. Imagine one always just celebrates attendance numbers. But imagine the second church always celebrates life change. You got 2 completely churches. One that's focused on attendance, but one that's focused on the people. And if you're a culture in the ministry context that always just focuses on numbers, but you miss out on the people, you miss out on the stories of the numbers. And I feel like for us as a church, what I want to do is I want to talk about the stories of life change. Because I'm a driven personality, I want big numbers. But what I want more than big numbers is big life change. And have I communicated that to our team? Are they looking for life change? Or am I more focused on who didn't come on Sunday than celebrating who did? Look at the stories you tell. What are you consistently celebrating as a coach, as a boss, as a leader? What do your people know in your life that matters most? Are you communicating to them what matters most? And I want to be a church that communicates people matter. More than numbers, people matter. The fourth thing when it comes to creating this culture, the fourth thing is that reminding yourself that clarity creates consistency. I feel like we've talked about this now in the last couple of weeks. We've talked about the context of clarity, how important it is to be clear, because people don't understand what's not clear. The same thing happens in our culture. Clarity creates consistency in your culture. People don't know the kind of culture you want if you don't clearly communicate the culture you desire. Habakkuk in the Old Testament, Habakkuk 2, chapter 2, verse 2 says, write the vision and make it plain. Just don't write it down, make it plain. Like I communicated a little bit ago about sharing the expectations with our team. I can't expect my team to live out expectations I have not clearly communicated. Are you clearly communicating to your team, to your family, to your business, to your staff, to your organization, the culture that you want? People cannot consistently live what they do not clearly understand. Many leaders assume culture is understood, but healthy leaders define it. I think for many of us, the biggest problem in our leadership today is assumption. It's not intentionality, it's not clarity, it's assumption. We just assume that people know, but they don't know what they don't know. I've hired assistants before in my life, and when I bring them into the interview, they said, what's the number one thing you need from me? And I said, I need you to read my mind. And I realize that is the most difficult thing on the planet. But I want to live in such a way that you watch me and know what I need before I ask for it. And I feel like for us as leaders, we've got to live that life and communicate to our teams in such a way that they know what we're looking for. They know what we expect. I love the fact that many of our team now, they know me. They know what I'm looking for. They know what I'm watching. And they look to fix those things because those things matter to me. And you've got to be that kind of leader to your team. Culture must become language. Culture must become expectations. Culture must become repeatable. It has to be. It's the clarity of it that brings understanding to the team. Unspoken expectations create unnecessary frustration. We all know this to be true. Healthy culture is explained, not assumed. Confusion creates inconsistency. There is a game that we play at my house. I'm sure you know the game Uno. Now, we have some rules in the Blakeney house. We call it Uno Cutthroat. And Uno Cutthroat's pretty aggressive. So let's say you're playing with 4 people and someone throws down a draw 4. If you're not next to them, you're just at the table, you have a draw 4, you can throw one down. And the person next to you that you threw down the draw 4 on now draws 8. And if someone else has it, so we play with friends. And we have to communicate Blakeney Uno Cutthroat rules. Because if we just sat down and started throwing down draw 4s, people would be like, what's happening right now? That's not how we play the game. And I couldn't get mad at them because we didn't clearly explain the rules for how we play Uno Cutthroat. And if you want to know the rules, let me know. I'll destroy you. Anyway, it's Uno Cutthroat. And a lot of us in our leadership positions just assume that people know the rules or the expectations or the standards by which you want the staff to run, how you want them to live, how you want them to work. But they don't know what you don't tell them. So you got to bring clarity to the organization. You got to bring clarity to your staff, clarity to your team, clarity to how you want the culture to look, or it will just accidentally happen and you won't like the results. Many staff members feel this way. They feel like they don't know exactly what's going on. And not because they're bad people, but because no one clearly defined the culture to them. Create language around the culture. Don't just say, we want excellence. Define excellence. Just don't say, we value honor. Define honor, right? Specific cultures create specific results. So give expectations to your team of what they can live out. And number 5, the 5th principle when it comes to creating this culture. Here you go. Ready? Culture is built daily, not annually. Culture is built daily, not annually. Luke 16:10, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Culture is rarely shaped by big moments. Culture is shaped by repeated moments. I'm going to say that again. Culture is not just created by big moments. It's created by repeated moments. The daily meetings, the hallway conversations, the difficult conversations, the staff gatherings, staff meetings, volunteer interaction. Small moments create massive momentum. And if you've got someone in your team or someone in your downline or someone that's working for you, you have to maybe coach them on a consistent basis. But maybe you'll need to coach them on a consistent basis of the culture that you want so it gets ingrained in them, the culture that they need to live out. Culture isn't created by retreats. It's created by routine. Your culture is being built in ordinary moments. Great cultures are not event-driven. They are habit-driven. Think about a river that runs through a canyon. It begins to dig out the canyon. It's not a one-time thing. It's the consistency of the river going through the canyon that develops the canyon. And you need to repeatedly help people understand the culture you're creating so it creates that pathway for a ministry and life and business and organization to flow. So instead of asking what culture do we want, ask what behaviors must happen every day to create the culture that we need. So let me wrap it up. One day, a visitor could walk into your church, walk into your business, walk into your organization. A new employee could walk into your business, your organization. A volunteer could join your team, and within minutes, I'm gonna tell you right now, they're gonna feel your culture, because culture is felt before it's explained. That's why culture matters. When people come to Anchor and they say, "I've never in my life been to a church like Anchor," that makes me feel so good, because I wanted to be a church that's unlike any other church. I know the culture I'm trying to create. And when people come in for the first time and feel that, it makes me feel like I'm doing my job. So here's the reality. If you don't intentionally create your culture, one will form anyway. I promise you, culture is being created around you or with you. And I think you and I need to be men and women of leadership that are helping create the culture that we want. Understand, silence creates culture. Tolerance creates culture. Repetition creates culture. Leadership creates culture. And the greatest cultures aren't accidental. They're intentional. They're protected. They're reinforced. They're celebrated. And they're modeled. So make sure you're creating the right culture for your staff, the right culture for your team, the right culture for your organization, the right culture for your business, because culture will happen either accidentally or intentionally. And you and I need to be men and women that are creating the culture that we want, that we need, not that we hope happens. Man, I hope this episode helped you today. The Pastor's Playbook, creating that culture. Make sure it's by design, not by accident. And I guarantee you, if you're modeling that culture, teaching that culture is going to happen. And you'll be excited by the effects of what you did. Hey, I love you so much. We'll see you next week.